We're here with Congressman Sam Graves, Republican of Missouri. He is the chairman of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee. And Congressman Graves, thanks for speaking to Transport Topics.
Absolutely.
Everybody's talking about the infrastructure plan. Can you give us any insight on the timing? What are you hearing?
Well, we're waiting on the administration to come up with their ideas and their framework or guidelines that they'd like to see done. We're probably going to see that right after the State of the Union or the first part of February, so we're coming right up on it. Could be next week, the week after, is when we're looking forward to those ideas, and then we'll move pretty fast. At least in the House and the Senate, we'll move fairly quickly once we get their guidelines and their ideas.
Can you offer us any insight, any conversations with the administration on specific details?
Well, it's going to be, there's no real specific details at this point.
Okay.
It is going to be a massive infrastructure bill, though. It's going to include a lot of things, obviously roads and bridges, aviation, water systems, sewer systems, just a lot of everything to do with infrastructure. So it's going to be a very broad plan. Obviously, the administration would like to see $1 trillion worth of investment. We'll see if we can get there. That's a pretty tough lift, but that's one of the things we're waiting on the administration to see what they want to do in terms of the expanse of it, and obviously the funding issue as well.
We've had several senior administration officials, from DJ Gribbin, the infrastructure policy advisor, to the secretary, Elaine Chao, and just now at TRB, some other officials were talking about this plan is going to aim to change the culture, the funding culture. Do you have any insight as to what they're talking about when they're saying changing the culture?
Well, the biggest thing, and it's much like what we would like to see here in the House, and that is the efficiency of the way that programs are implemented. How they're put forth. A lot of programs out there, or funding packages, or the way things are funded. You take TIFIA, for instance.
Yeah.
Trying to make that easier to qualify. Right now, we've found that a lot of the programs that were passed in past highway bills, it's very hard to qualify, very hard to meet the criteria to be able to do a lot of these projects. So we want to see that streamline, a little bit easier for entities, whether that's states or municipalities, to be able to qualify. And so we're going to do a lot of efficiency work more than anything else. Speed up these projects, make them happen faster.
Before the end of last year, you held a roundtable on freight connectivity. Where do you see proposals to improve access to freight corridors and the mobility of freight in this plan?
Well, as much as anything else, we're going to take a look at the existing programs out there and see how we can make them better. And obviously the most important thing when it comes to moving freight is just making sure that, our system, our transportation system, is the most efficient it can be.
Yeah.
We obviously have some issues there. We have a lot of modernization to take place. But what we're going to do is look at those programs we already have and see how much more efficient or how much better we can make them for freight. Everything in this country moves. Everything moves. One mode of transportation or another, whether that's by truck, or it could be by train, or by plane, or by barge, or by pipeline. Everything moves, and we need a first-class infrastructure system to be able to make sure that those goods and services move eventually. Now, ultimately, and it doesn't matter if it moves by a pipeline, or it moves by an airplane, or it moves by a train. It's still got to get on a truck sooner or later, and it's got to make it to its final destination. So we want to make sure that access is just as flawless or as seamless as possible.
Not only the truckers, but a lot of the stakeholders, they tell yourself and your colleagues that raising the gas tax at the federal level is the one way that you could have an immediate injection of new revenue into the system. Where are we with this Highway Trust Fund debate?
Well, we're obviously taking a real hard look at how we move forward. Do we want to stick with fuel tax, which is very regressive? We obviously have more and more vehicles on the road that simply don't pay any fuel tax.
Yeah.
Or we have more and more efficiency, so they're paying less fuel tax. Ultimately, we have to change over to something else, because as time goes on, it's going to get more and more, fewer and fewer dollars are going to come in as a result of those efficiencies or vehicles just not paying. So I would like to see us ultimately pivot. Now, could we use fuel tax, to inject immediately? We probably could, but it'd be very hard to pass. an increase in the fuel tax. I would much rather see us make a pivot towards something like, say, vehicle miles traveled, which we are studying in several states right now on how to implement that. It's a little easier in the commercial sector as opposed to the private sector, but ultimately I think we can get there in both arenas, or all the arenas that are out there. But I'd like to see us pivot at this point and be able to recover all of those dollars for individuals using using the roads, whether that is commercial or individuals. We want to be able to pay for those roads, and the individuals that are using them, they obviously need to be a part of that. So we have folks out there not paying anything for that use, and we need to recover those dollars.
And what role do you see the private sector playing going forward as part of this plan, and when your committees start crafting a bill?
Well, obviously the private sector is going to be important. We've been taking ideas and obviously having roundtables to try to get stakeholders' thoughts and ideas when it comes to moving that ball forward. How hard would it be to make a transition, for instance, from fuel tax to vehicle miles traveled? How hard would it be to to look at other alternatives, and for that matter too, how much are we losing? How much revenue are we losing from these efficiencies or from vehicles that simply aren't paying? So we're depending on the private sector, the stakeholders, for a lot of that input, and we've been doing that for the last year or so, and we're going to continue to do it until we come up with a solution.
The chairman of the full committee, Congressman Bill Graves, Bill Schuster, announced that he's not going to seek re-election. Can you talk about, and he's going to dedicate this year to working on this plan. Can you talk about the conversations you've had with the chairman on this plan and advancing it this year?
Oh, absolutely, and it's a priority of his, obviously, and I'm looking forward to working with him. It's a priority of mine as well. We want to see it happen next year. Or this year, I guess. We're already in 2018, so we want to see it happen, and sooner rather than later. So he's committed to it. I'm committed to it. We're going to do everything we can to move it out of the House, as I stated earlier. Once we get the ideas from the administration in the next couple of weeks, we're going to move very, very quickly to get this done and start paving some roads.
Should all the stakeholders, should they be optimistic that there's going to be a plan?
I would be, yes. And I'm optimistic myself. I know the chairman is as well, and we're going to be putting all our resources towards it and obviously moving the ball forward. And
Congressman, I asked you this the last time we sat down with Congressman Schuster, not going to be in the picture next year. Talk about who do you think should be the next chairman?
Well, I'm working towards it.
Okay.
I am obviously going to put forth all of my ideas and thoughts, my seniority, obviously, and the things that I've done. I've done 3 highway bills now in my time here in Congress. And numerous WRDA bills and rail bills and all the things that have taken place. Former chairman of the Small Business Committee, and I'll hold out my accomplishments there or hold them up and make my case. But I'm actively seeking that and working towards it, and something that I would really like to do. Obviously, keeping the majority is vitally important to that process, at least on the Republican side, and so we have to do that first, and then we can turn our attention to the chairmanship.
Sounds good. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
We'll stay tuned on seeing who the next chairman is going to be, and thank you for tuning in at ttnews.com.